Hello everyone, it's episode 69 of the Fitness Business Growth Podcast. I'm here with Nerida, the first person as a guest in my new home studio. How are you?
I'm really well. It's such an honor to be here.
Thank you so much. So Nerada's a two-time guest, emotional intelligence coach.
Yes.
Before that, obviously Fitness Business Growth for fitness business owners, you've been on before.
Yeah.
I want to reintroduce you. You have been a gym owner. Give us the 60-second story of Lissome, what it got to, number of staff, number of members, so gym owners know that you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so I launched my women's only gym in 2014. I opened up a second site in Maitland in 2018, got both gyms to, over 500 members. I ran a team of 15 staff. And then it was sort of the pandemic and that sort of struggle of the 2 years of open, close. And I went through a bit of a breakup myself. I just sort of started moving more into emotional intelligence. And I decided to sell the gyms in 2022.
Okay.
So ran them for nearly 9 years. And I'm really pleased with what I achieved. I love the industry. I love the people in the industry. But I just ultimately was looking for something a bit different.
What was your favorite thing about being a gym owner?
You know what? It never felt like I was working, like going to the gym and coaching, training, socializing with the members. We were very much, I had a strong focus on community. So it didn't feel like work. I felt very lucky that I created an income for myself and a business that I could, have so much freedom, give other women freedom and also flexibility. A lot of the women that I employed were mums. And also we did a lot of charity work. Like we gave back to our community. Like every single year we'd organize a big charity ball, other small events. So yeah, that was a really nice thing to sort of look back on that.
What do you not miss about being a gym owner?
I don't miss the stress. I don't miss the stress of like managing staff, managing members, the emotional toil of managing people. I don't miss like the stress of like overheads and making, payments and rent and managing your cash flow. So I don't miss that at all.
So 500 members, 15 staff is a big team.
Mm-hmm.
What was different when you were doing it on your own? When you first launched Lissome,
Yeah.
you were doing every session, cleaning the gym, compared to having 15 staff and 500 members later.
Yeah, well, I ran the gym pretty much on my own for the first 18 months. I would say I coached every single class, cleaned the gym, did all the admin, all the social media, everything.
Gyms are unbelievably profitable.
Yes, they really are. And it was fantastic. Like, I'm so proud of myself. Like, I'm, from Housing Commission, like, I remember like my very first job, I was a checkout chick at Woolworths just down the road here. And I remember thinking to myself at that point, like if I could get a job here as a department manager, like that would be the best that I could ever achieve. So to go out and actually create my own business, a business that was like really well known in Newcastle at the time.
It was.
I
can vouch for that.
Yeah, like it was funny. I was putting together my media kit recently and my VA asked me for all my appearances like in every single media outlet. And like the Newcastle Herald featured us like 15 or 20 times. Like, Daily Mail, Yahoo, NBN, like Prime, like we were featured so often. So yeah, that was really amazing. But I must say towards the end, as much as having staff was also a huge responsibility that I think I took for granted until the pandemic. That responsibility really weighed on me through that period. But before that, the last like 2018 and 2019 were such glory years. Like I was hands off in the business. I had so much freedom. I loved it. We were making money. It was, those years we'll never get back, but that was amazing.
One of my favorite quotes is ease is a greater threat to progress than hardship. It's Denzel Washington.
Yeah.
When we opened our gyms in 2015, 509 members. I thought I was the smartest man in the world. But ease is a greater threat than progress.
Yeah.
Before you know it, we had 7 locations.
Yes.
So sometimes you just don't realize that you are in the glory years of being a gym owner.
Oh, I had no idea. Until the pandemic changed everything for me. But, in saying that, it was such a challenging time emotionally, financially, and physically. But I look back and I changed as a person in those few years as well.
One of the worst things for me about the pandemic was actually members turning against each other.
Yeah, that was really hard.
Some didn't agree.
Yeah.
And these friendships that were forged in the gyms where they go camping together, they ended overnight over a stupid fucking vaccine.
Yeah. Well, that was me. I lost, because for me, one of my core values was community. And what really didn't sit well with me was so many of the decisions that were being pushed upon gym owners. And one of the things about the segregation, that's the thing that really bothered me.
So angry.
Yeah.
I was so annoyed at all times.
I remember it was 2021, October 11th, they said you can reopen your gyms, your businesses, but to vaccinated clients only. And, you know, at that point, I said to my team, I would rather close this business forever than ever segregate my clients. There's no way.
That's right. I remember you stayed outside.
I stayed outside. And it was to the detriment of my business. But now looking back, you know, Brene Brown says it. She says your values aren't yours until they're tested when everyone's against you. And at that time, like, yes, I stayed outside. We didn't go back in. And it broke my business, but I walked away knowing that, like, when I'm tested, I will back myself. I won't split people up. I won't cower to the government, to the media, to people's judgments. Like, as much as I lost a lot of friends and a lot of, you know, respect in that time, I look back on it and I'm still proud as to how I carried myself and the decisions I made. I'd do it all again.
I remember hearing about it. I was just like, I didn't think Australia was going to stand for it. I thought, like,
that's
if
what I
Scott
thought
Morrison
too.
wants to close my gym, I think it's not going to knock on my door.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the politicians, it wasn't the police, it was the actual people in the community. So we had the cops called on us 3 or 4 times.
Me too.
And if this person, imagine that, gym owners calling the cops on other gym owners.
Do you know, this is what I found so interesting, right? So in that time where there was so much like upheaval, people were turning on each other, right? Because everyone was locked in lockdown. People were living with restrictions, right? What was really interesting, I didn't reopen my gym on the 11th because I thought if I did that the police would immediately be there, because we had the police, like, it was a joke in the end, because I would travel back and forth between Newcastle and Maitland trying to meet the cops so that my girls didn't have to deal with it. I was just trying to protect them because it was so stressful for them. Then I just thought for sure the police are going to be there on October 11th checking to see. But you know what? All the gym owners I spoke to, so many of them called me and said, Nerida, open your gyms. The police aren't coming around. And I was like, what do you mean? Of course they're coming around to check if you're open to vaccinated people. No, they weren't. And guess what else? Do you know what was so interesting? The reason why people weren't calling the cops on you then was because they were free.
That's correct, because the date happened later on.
It's when people are free, they don't care about what you're doing. But it was because people were locked in their homes and people were struggling, that's when they cared what you were doing. So it was so interesting. So we then reopened, but we opened to everybody. The cops never came around once, which I thought was so fascinating. So it was really an interesting thing to look into people's psyche and understand, wow, you don't really care what I do. You only care when you're trapped. Yeah.
So we actually followed the rules to a T. We really did. So we had Steve, who was a resident of Kurri Kurri.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, he was a resident. Hang on, I got it wrong. So there was something about you couldn't go through postcodes, or you couldn't go.
Yeah, it was the time. What's it called? The
whatever.
The zones. Like
the zones. Yeah. So me and Steve were zoned at Cardiff.
Yeah.
And Brody and Mitch were zoned at Adamstown. So me and Steve were at Cardiff for like 3 months.
Yeah.
Brody and Mitch at Adamstown, and we had like bikes out in the rain, marquees, kettlebells, dumbbells, and the cops kept coming. Like, hey, like, listen, like, we're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And then what was worse than that is then the landlord started complaining that we're out in the driveway.
Yeah.
So we just couldn't win.
Oh, it's such a hard time.
And then the gym owner called the cops on us. I was like, wow, like.
Yeah, it was a crazy time. Well, do you know what? It was so interesting. I remember running a session down at the beach. Like we were down at the Newcastle foreshore because there was a rig and there was also kind of bits and pieces of gym equipment like steps and stuff. So we were loving it. We were going down there 9:30 every morning, training in the sunshine. Like I really enjoyed that time. And I'll never forget, there was like 15 men standing under the rig and there was maybe 6 or 7 of us women spread right out. And the police pulled up, parked the car, walked straight past the men and straight over to us and started. And I was sitting there going, what's going on? They're all not social distancing, but you're picking on us. And it was because we were a business. Yeah. And I was about to be fined. And it was only that all of those men came over and pushed on the cops and said, hey, this is not fair. We're going to take you personally. We're going to hold you liable because we're seeing what's going on here. You're picking on her because she's a business.
The classic gym owner's response for everything was like, why are smoke shops open?
Yeah, McDonald's, like exactly. It was never about health. It was about breaking small businesses. That's what it was about. Let's be honest.
It's just I still.
Do you know the amount of times I have been sent messages saying what you're doing is irresponsible, what you're doing is totally, you're going to spread COVID, you're going to kill people. I just want to say this for the record, 4 years in, still haven't had COVID. I'm not vaccinated.
I had COVID after my Bucks party, but you catch worse things in Cairns.
Yeah.
So it was fun.
I still have not had it. Like I've been around people constantly and it's like, you're kidding. Like it was just all such a fast. But anyway.
I think just for small business owners, like only now are they starting to see the results.
Yeah.
And me and Mitch spoke about this. When we actually reopened, it was never easier to acquire clients.
Yeah.
Because it was taken away for the first time. People want what they can't have.
Yeah.
So October 2021, it was so exciting. It was brand new. People were flocking to gyms.
Yeah.
And then in early January, it was still Omicron was the next thing. So
That's
I
right.
was still a bit worried.
Yeah.
But I think masks came off in February. So
Yeah.
exercise was still novel, still new.
Yeah.
And then we got through winter through sheer excitement of I can go to the gym.
Yeah.
So the first winter that gym owners really experienced in years and years and years was actually last year.
Yeah,
And I
true.
think it hit them differently.
Yes.
It just opened. Like, oh,
Yeah.
I haven't seen the ebbs and flows. I said, well, like, you've never lived in a time like this.
Yes,
So
true. It's so interesting. And it makes me sad to see, like, I hear of gyms closing every day, just closing, not even being able to sell. And it breaks my heart. It breaks my, business owners in general, I see the emotional turmoil that they're going through 4 years of like emotional stress, financial stress. Like, it breaks my heart. But
it bothers me. You walk past like a closed shop
yeah,
and people just dismiss it. That was someone's dream.
Yeah.
That was someone's money, time,
Yeah.
energy, effort.
Yeah.
Like, it's just being a small business owner is just really difficult.
it's so difficult. You're paying every business owner, not just gyms, are telling me they're paying 20 to 30% more for staff, but getting 20 to 30% less the quality. So it's just not a sustainable business model. Like bricks and mortar businesses, like, and I hear it constantly every single day.
Yeah, and that's where, like, I think where me and Mitch have been different is we were good operators before COVID.
Yes. Yeah.
So before COVID, you could have got through your gym,
Yeah.
had 100 members without even trying because there
Yeah.
was less competition. It was new, it was exciting. It was the boom of group
Yeah.
fitness.
Yeah.
Post-COVID, it's now a more accurate climate.
Yeah.
It's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
So, like, since CrossFit started,
Yep.
there was never, ever a decline in the economy. We had the greatest
that's
economy
true.
in the history of the world
Yep.
from when boutique group fitness started up until COVID.
That's
so
a good point.
these inflationary, like these fistula memberships, weren't a problem.
Mm.
Greatest economy ever.
Yeah.
So I just think, I don't want to be negative here, but like the dark days aren't behind gym owners. And if
they're
you
in front.
aren't a world-class operator, if you
Yeah.
aren't a great marketer, you aren't great at sales, you haven't got a great delivery, great
Yeah.
community, giving your members a reason to stay every fucking day that they
Yeah.
attend,
Yeah.
like, you are not going to last.
Yeah. It's so true. Everything you said there is completely correct. And I see it all the time. Like I coach, quite a few business owners and I talk to a lot of gym owners. Like my phone rings every week with someone begging me, do you know any staff? I'm struggling. Like, yeah, I'm constantly asked. So yeah, it's sad to see.
Okay.
It's sad to see. I feel very lucky that I had a business in that time where it was booming and there was so many great memories.
Biggest thing about being a gym owner too, the people that own gyms, they're the nicest,
Yeah.
most caring,
Yeah.
empathetic human beings on earth because
Yeah.
they've gone through a transformation typically
Yeah.
and they want others to experience it and they
Yeah.
just get slapped in the face, which is
Yeah.
what we literally try and do is like, hey, we'll do the shit
Yeah.
that it's not in your nature to do.
Yes. Yes, totally.
Let's move past the fitness
Yep.
industry. You've gone on to become Australia's #1 emotional intelligence coach.
Yep.
What is emotional intelligence? Let's define the term.
Yeah, that's such a great question because I'll tell you why I came to be in this. So I'm 41. Big part of me wants to be a wife and a mother one day. And in 2020, businesses were closed. My accountant said to me, I think you're going to go bankrupt. I went through a breakup at the same time. I had to move out of our house. I was living in an Airbnb and I was just completely lost. And I remember rock bottom, absolute rock bottom, never been lower. And I remember like after a couple of weeks, like lots of grieving, mourning and feeling very lost and confused because we'd never been through a time like it, right? Like we were just living in our houses, not leaving. I remember Googling, like, what is it that men look for in a wife? Like I was just so lost. And I thought it would be something around like beauty, looks, like, sense of humor, like all these things. And it was emotional connection. And at that point, I didn't even know what that meant.
Yeah, what's emotional connection?
Exactly. So that was what put me on the path of trying to understand that. So now I understand emotional intelligence is it being the relationship that you have with yourself and the relationship that you have with others, like underneath the surface level stuff. So it's the ability to emotionally attune to people and understand what's going on for them in their internal world, even if they may not be brave enough to speak what's going on. So let me ask you, have there ever been times in your life where you've had a conversation with someone and potentially held something back, like not being able to be completely honest?
Of course, everyone has.
Yeah, and so that is your emotional intelligence right there, right? It's when how you show up in the world externally is sort of out of alignment with what's going on internally. And you're doing that for a reason, right? You're doing it because you're trying to stay safe, you're trying to preserve relationships, you're not wanting to hurt people, but it's essentially because we lack the skills to understand how to honor both. So emotional intelligence, I believe, really helps you to realign your relationship with others to your relationship with self so that your needs are getting met, your boundaries aren't being crossed, and you feel safe to be your full, honest self with anybody.
So that was a lot.
Yeah, sorry.
So let's break that down. So emotional intelligence with oneself.
Yep.
we'll start with that. How
Yeah.
does that impact your relationship with yourself firstly?
Yeah.
And then how would that translate into your relationship with others?
Great question. So, have you ever, what I really notice is a lot of my clients tend to outwardly be very encouraging, very supportive, very loving, and the words that they speak to the people that they love are very positive. But then what I notice is internally they have a completely different relationship. So, they're quite negative, they're quite critical, harsh, high standards, perfectionist, procrastinator, maybe even a little bit of shame. Maybe the standards are never met. It's just this ongoing, relentless pursuit of something outside of yourself. So I think when it comes to self, it's about learning how to become compassionate, to become your own best friend, and so that your internal talk is kind, loving, supportive. Now,
Yeah. I saw a great quote. It was like, imagine if you spoke to your best friends how you speak to yourself.
That's
and
right.
you call them a fucking idiot.
You'd have no friends.
Yeah.
And this isn't about giving yourself a free pass, right? Like I walk the two lines of accountability and compassion. So
That's what I was going to say.
yeah,
That's where
I knew you were
So
going to.
that's where like
Yeah.
I don't know what emotional intelligence is. I
Yeah.
just do shit.
Yeah,
And I'm just
get
thinking,
shit done.
like, with emotional intelligence with oneself,
Yep.
how do you hold yourself accountable at the same time if you know that you're not doing the things you should be doing?
Yeah. So accountability is not shaming, right? So accountability, when I first sold La Somme, I was like, you know what? I've been waking up at 4 a.m. I've been slogging it out for the last couple of years. I don't want to have to wake up like to an alarm at all for the next 6 months. So I just took 6 months. Every morning I'd wake up whenever I felt like it and I'd go for a walk. So after 6 months, like I was sort of like, okay, you've been a bit of a lazy bitch for the last 6 months. Now it's time to get back in the gym. So when I sold the gym, I was like, I've gone through a whole chapter of massive accountability, like a lot of hard work and a lot of pain. I'm going to let myself lean into a bit of compassion for myself. And then after 6 months of that compassion, I'm like, okay, I'm ready to get back to walking that middle line. So it's about being able to say to yourself, what do I need right now? Do I need to be more hard on myself and more discerning? Or do I need to be a bit more gentle and kind and loving, supportive?
And that is intelligence. It's
100%.
identifying who needs to show up at that
That's
moment.
right. And it's about, being able to give yourself what you need. So if we're parented correctly, then what happens is when a parent teaches us how to have a beautiful, healthy, loving relationship to ourselves, we will naturally take that on. But I would argue 99% of people did not get that. So I would argue that most people talk pretty meanly to themselves because either a parent talked to themselves that way.
So give me an example. So
Yep.
I'm unhappy with my current situation in life.
Yep.
I've been a bad friend, a bad husband, bad father.
Yep.
And I'm speaking negatively to myself.
Yep.
What if I deserve that? What if I am displaying those traits that I'm not proud of? Like, I guess what is the difference between shame? Like, because with the word shame, right?
Yeah.
Like, then people move away from pain.
Yep.
So like, do you need pain to change?
Oh yeah, you definitely. I don't think anyone wakes up feeling really good, just trying to think, how can I understand my subconscious a little better today? Like It's always the pain that drives us to do this work. Now, I just want to say, when you say I'm acting like an idiot, I'm treating everyone terribly, I'm being a bad husband, bad friend, maybe I deserve it. My deep belief is that inherently we're all good human beings. And if we're showing up in the world in a way that potentially looks bad.
This is pretty weird, by the way. I was with Darby this morning, Mitch's baby.
Yeah.
And I was looking at him and he was so adorable, so cute, so beautiful. Like, how could you turn out to be a bad human being unless someone's taught you that?
That's right. 100%. We're all a product of our environment. So I was listening to a podcast this morning, which was amazing. Have you heard of the still face experiment?
I haven't. No.
Okay. So I find this mind blowing. This is old research, but a lot of people don't know it. So, there's this whole belief right now that we are a product. If you suffer with mental health, it's a chemical imbalance. Now, there are so many people out there trying really hard to prove that wrong, and that it's actually your relationships in your childhood that indicates that. So the still face experiment is a perfect example of this in a really simple term. There's a baby sitting in a high chair and its mum is told to come down and engage with the baby. So emotionally connect. So what that looks like, it's like mirroring, right? So potentially your mum, I'm baby. And so I'm smiling at you, you smile back. I point, you look to where I point. I laugh, you laugh. So it's this act of mirroring where mother is responding to baby emotionally. So in that moment, baby knows I'm connected to mum. Mum loves me. I'm loved. I'm connected to the universe. I'm worthy. I am worthy. Okay. I want you to remember that. Now, she's told to stand up, turn around, and then she's told to come back down and make eye contact with the baby, but hold a still face. So not meet the baby's needs for connection.
Okay.
And so the baby like starts smiling and then mum's just deadpan. And the baby's like smiling again and smiling more. And then the baby starts pointing again. And then all of a sudden mum's not responding, not engaging. So the baby starts to act out, starts to smack, it starts to cry, it starts to hit her. She's like, why aren't you responding to me? This is essentially you as an adult. So if that happens to you as a child, if you're constantly turned away from and your needs are not met and you do not feel that connection with a caretaker, you will act out in order to get those needs met.
So going back to emotional intelligence, so someone isn't proud of their behavior and then the difference between shame and accountability, they start acting out. How would you help that person act in a positive, how would you help that person act in a way that's healthy for them to get the change they're after?
Well, I let go of behavior. I wouldn't even focus on behavior. I'd try and go into their internal world and try to understand what pain they're running from.
So what caused them to act like that in the first place?
We're always seeking a need. Always. We are selfish human beings and we're always working to get a need met. So if someone's acting badly, like say for instance, let's take cheating for example, right? A lot of people think, I work with a lot of couples.
COVID, cheating, we're going to get banned off YouTube here.
Okay, so a lot of couples I work with go through infidelity. And a lot of the times a woman, let's just use the example that the man's cheated. It happens equally both sides, just to be clear. But let's just say that the man's cheated and she takes that very personally. She thinks that he's done that specifically to hurt her. Actually, that's not the case. That man is so wired to get validation that he's just continually seeking a more beautiful, a more young, a more a woman that just especially if there's pain in that relationship, right? So if he's experiencing emotional pain, some people do not have the ability to face that pain and lean into it because they've got so much pain they haven't dealt with. So in order to soothe and regulate himself, he will look outside of the relationship to look for that validation to feel within with another woman. It's not actually about this woman. So I always say, let go of what you think the behavior is. And so I look at that and the need underneath that is he's trying to feel worthy. That's essentially what it is. The way he's going about it isn't ideal. But when we actually take all that away and we stop shaming him and we actually see, wow, you're actually still struggling with your worthiness and you keep thinking that your worthiness is outside of you in a woman.
So that's interesting because I know a lot of women would hate the fact that you just said that.
That's fine.
That the husband doesn't feel worthy, therefore he cheated. Not excusing the behavior.
100%. It's not to say...
So then at what point is the behavior that's egregious that it's no longer like, hey, like you're just being a fuckwit?
Well, it's every situation's different, right? Like for me, what's important to me in a relationship is accountability. So if I was in a relationship with a man and he had cheated and he was deeply sorry and he wanted to figure this out and I could see he was in pain and he didn't want to lose me and he was willing to do the work to heal, I would give that person a second chance. I've seen amazing relationships overcome infidelity. I've seen infidelity be the wake-up call to the emotional disconnect that was always there. Now, if that person continued to cheat, there's a great quote, fool me once, more fool you, fool me twice, more fool me. So if he continually does that, then I'm accepting that behavior, right? So at the end of the day, I'm not here to judge you whether you stay with someone for whatever reasons. But what I am here to say is all we ever have power to do is look at ourselves. So what is it about me that's in this dynamic that feels so natural and normal? I will tell you this for truth, okay? We always seek to be with a partner that reminds us energetically of the caretaker we craved love from the most.
That's a weird thought.
So what often happens is if you are with someone that's constantly cheating on you, chances are your father or mother cheated on their spouse as well.
So daddy issues.
Yeah, or mummy issues. I see a lot of men that continue to cheat because their mother was emotionally unavailable to them. That's their mother wound they're seeking to be fulfilled, and they're constantly looking for attention from the feminine because deep down they didn't have a healthy relationship with their mother.
So going back to that word, emotional intelligence, understanding oneself. So someone's acting out in a way that they shouldn't be doing, as opposed to shaming themselves, speaking poorly about themselves, calling themselves names. It's like, well, like how they address that. And and when they work with you, what do you do?
Yeah, so the first thing I do is try to get a bit of a background as to their childhood. Their first 0 to 7 years, it's called your emotional home. So your emotional home is basically like a computer program that's created and built that just programs your entire life. So there are all these patterns, beliefs, behaviors, things that you are just programmed to look for and to keep playing out. So the first thing I try to do is get a really good understanding of their emotional home. Then I try to get I try to help them see the connection to how they're playing that out now in life, like in their adult life.
So with the emotional home, right, is it people seek what they lack in that first 7 years?
So, okay, your emotional home is essentially the emotions that you felt most from 0 to 7. And they're usually a blend of the emotions that two of your parents felt the most. So my emotional home it's 3 to 5 emotions, right? For me, it's rejection, sadness, loneliness, confusion, and shame. Now that I'm older, I can see that I picked up the rejection from the way my father treated me. I can see the depression, sadness comes from my mother. I can see the confusion comes from the relationship with my father. I can see the shame comes from my father. He projected a lot of shame onto me. So it's a blend of those emotions, right? And so what happens is,
back in my mind thinking, what are my 5?
Yeah, what are your 5? So, and what happens is, so I'm in business, right? I would say I'm a fairly successful woman. Now, I coach a lot of women who really struggle with like worthiness in business. Like they feel a lot of inadequacy. They could never come onto a podcast like this. They could never go and do public speaking. Whereas I've got I will do that stuff any day of the week. You could sit there and criticize my work and it would not cause me pain. But you reject me in some way, like you reject me in a relationship, and that will be deeply painful because it reminds me of that pain from my father. But whereas the flip side, the inadequacy wound, I often see is connected to the mother. So when a mother is super loathing, like really hard on herself, really like a perfectionist, never always goes out looking perfect, is always looking at her weight, stuff like that, that will be passed on to the daughter. And then she grows up with this inadequacy wound.
So all these patterns are playing on in the background. People don't really understand why. They act out, they behave, they treat themselves poorly. Bad emotional intelligence.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say bad. I would just say we don't know what we don't know. Like I was 38 before I discovered this sort of work, and it changed my life. Like for me, I did struggle with, like, I thought I had depression. I thought I had a chemical imbalance for my whole life. I went to psychologist after psychologist, counselors, life coaches. I went searching everywhere for the answers. Every one of them told me the same thing over and over. You've got depression. You just need to accept it and take medication. Now, and I was suicidal at points. Like I was I was really, really unwell. Now, when I started doing this work around the emotional home and emotional intelligence, I started to understand, hang on a minute. It kind of makes sense that I struggle with rejection, because when I think about all of those moments from 0 to 7 that my father rejected me, it kind of makes sense that I feel a lot of shame.
So you feel as though that 0 to 7 period, your emotional home, is that strong of an impact that it can impact you well into your late 30s? Or it allows you to understand why you feel that way and allows you to forgive yourself effectively for feeling that way?
I do believe it's pretty strong. I will say this, right? Now, everyone's at a different point in their journey when they're ready, like when they are wanting to understand themselves on a deeper level. When you get to that point where you're really, really like you've had enough and you need change, I can say, I reckon 99% of the time it's their emotional home. Whereas I get a lot of people that say they don't think that that's the case. And now I would say for people like that, they probably just haven't hit their dark night of the soul yet. They're not in enough pain that they need to look at it. So it may not bother them. Their life may be just sort of cruisy and it feels kind of good. Their pain may come later in life.
Yeah, of course.
So, but I only really work with people who are going through pain in their relationships or in their business or in their mental health and well-being or in their parenting.
And you feel all 4 of them come back to emotional intelligence and then links all the way back to their emotional home.
I'll die on that hill every day of the week.
When I think about my childhood, I thought the only thing I think of was like my parents were poor.
Yep.
They lacked money.
Yep.
Therefore, I lack money.
Yep. Not
for me to provide for the future kids I haven't got, so they don't lack anything.
Yeah.
But I can't think of anything else that triggers like, well, why I am the way that I am.
So what can you tell me why? What when you say why you are the way that you are, what is that? How do you feel most days?
Feel most days? That's a great question. Just grateful.
Yeah.
Grateful.
Yep.
Grateful for the house I live in. Grateful for the studio.
Yeah. Great.
Grateful for Mitch. Grateful for Ellen.
Yep.
Just generally grateful.
So you would say you're a generally happy person?
Even happy is a funny word, isn't it?
Okay. Peaceful might be better.
You own a business now. Nothing's peaceful.
True. Good point.
What type of person am I? I would say that I am. I'm happy. I'm happy.
Yep. Are there times where you don't feel happy, like where you feel other emotions, like heavier emotions?
It's more just the classic comparison. Like always wanting
There we
more.
go.
Always wanting more so that my kids always have what they have that I didn't have.
But do you understand this? Okay, I love this, and I love that you're trying to heal that wound. Now, let me give you a perfect example.
Is it a wound though, or is it just like, Jamie, like you got enough? Like that's my whole thing with EQ, where we are very, very different. It's like, just get on with it.
It's a male.
Yeah.
Men naturally are more logical. Women are more like emotional. That's so normal.
Nothing annoys my wife more
Yeah.
than trying to overcome her emotional
Exactly.
Get out
Yeah.
the spreadsheet.
Yeah. Let's just fix it.
Yeah.
Whereas actually what she actually just wants you to do is emotionally attune to her. So your pain may not come yet until you have kids. Because when your kids, okay, let me give you an example, right? I've got a client right now who, he very similar, like grew up very poor and so works very, very hard and has kids, and he's now coming to see me because his relationship's breaking down because he's not a present father. Now, kids don't care what they have. They care about time. They care about quality time with their parents because children, our self-worth is born by two people, mother and father, and the amount of time that we spend with them and the amount that we're emotionally attuned to them. So remember the still-faced baby experiment? If we know that when we're bidding for their connection, they generally turn towards us and that they like being with us, they love us, they think that we're good people, we will naturally grow up to be secure, happy, content people. Now, if you are so driven to more money, and yet your child never sees you, never spends time with you, that is going to be wounding for the child.
I guess the biggest thing too is my biggest fear in life. I've shared this heaps of times, but like I left Centrelink. I used to work for the government.
Yeah.
February 9, 2012.
Yeah.
And the thought of going back there sends chills down my spine.
Yeah.
And the reason why I like money or making money or providing for Ellen, my wife, host my future kids, is like the idea of if I was working a 9-to-5 job that I'd hate, I'd be a terrible person to be around.
Yeah.
Because if I'm not happy on the inside, I got a short fuse. I'm not tolerant.
Yeah.
And that's just not who I want to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's more about understanding like where do you go to when things aren't going your way, or what emotions do you feel, or because this whole never enough, like that will be interesting to see how that plays out with you. Like when you spend time with people, do you feel like you're present?
Oh God, no.
Yeah. So how do you think that lands for them?
Yeah, it's something that we really work on.
Great.
We have time on the calendar where phones are down.
Yeah, awesome. Great. Example. So you're very conscious of that.
I'm conscious of it. Yeah. I've definitely gotten better.
Yeah, great.
Horrendous.
Yeah, great.
Horrendous for years.
So usually we're not present. We can't be present because we live in a world these days. If you haven't read the book Stolen Focus, you should read it. But these days we live in a world where distractions are just constant, right? Now, I'm a big believer the journey of life isn't really about being happy. It's about self-actualization. So it's about look at how good you feel knowing you've built the business you've built. Like that gives you a sense of pride. It gives you a sense of fulfillment, right? I talk to people all the time, like when you bake your own sourdough, that feels so much better than going to Woolworths and buying sourdough. We all inherently want to know that we can move through challenging times and become a better person, right? And learn from it. Now, what happens is, where was I going with this? I just lost my train of thought. So that's my belief around life. Now, that's where I was going. So the inability, but we live in this society, right, where there's constant distractions. Now, we've taught ourselves we can't be at peace with just ourselves. Like not many people can just sit without a phone or a book or anything and just be with themselves.
Can't remember the last time I went for a walk without a podcast.
Yeah. And so what's interesting is, and now this is why I believe we're seeing such a huge spike in anxiety and depression in teenagers. Like it's crazy because actually play and dead time, like dead stillness and like just actually time to just potter is actually a form of meditation. It's a time where we self-reflect and we process. So I'll tell you an example. I've got a niece and a nephew, 7 and 9, about 2 years ago. I'll never forget it. I'd started doing this work on parenting and stuff, and I was with them and they had this huge fight. And then we sort of moved through it, and then they split off, and he went outside and had a soccer ball and was kicking it against the wall of the garage, like kicking it so hard.
So angry.
And he's so angry. And she goes and sits with her dollhouse and she picks up her dolls and she's like, you did this to me and you did that to me. And I was like, wow, this is so interesting. They're both processing what's just happened. They're emotionally processing that argument, but in different ways. Now, the most dangerous thing that we do is instead of letting them have that time to process, we give them a device. Because what happens is information in, and no out, no reflection, no space. That's what impedes our mental health worse than anything. Now, Dr. Amen is coming out with this research now where he's saying that for every hour a child is on a device, it increases their likelihood of suicide by 10%.
Every hour?
Every hour that they're on a device every day.
Jeez.
That's pretty crazy, hey?
It's
And
hard to-
most
yeah.
kids are on devices anywhere between 7 to 12 hours a day. That's insane.
Yeah.
And if we don't start recognizing this now, like we are headed for
I'm very, very grateful that I was the last
I
generation. to
know,
go through
me
high
too.
school.
I know,
I
without a
went through high
phone.
school and Facebook came out, but I had the best of both worlds.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Facebook came out in 2003. It
Yeah.
was popular in Australia 2018,
Yeah.
2008. I got Facebook in like year 11.
Yeah.
So I had pre-internet,
Yeah.
internet, and even then, Wi-Fi was terrible. So I
Yeah.
had internet at home.
Yeah.
So we had both.
Yeah.
It's almost unimaginable.
Yeah.
We were
I
traveling
really
to
feel
Europe
for
in
kids.
2010. Like finding Wi-Fi was
Yeah,
difficult.
yeah.
You would seek it out. Like now it's just everywhere, right?
Yeah.
I do notice that though, when I am with my friends,
Yep.
I'm present.
Yep.
And I think it's more the environment for me. If I'm here
Yeah.
and the computer's right there,
Yeah.
then like I might just check something.
Of course, yeah.
And then
Oh,
all of a sudden, you're there an hour later.
I'm guilty of it. I do scroll on Instagram. I'm guilty of it, but I'm aware of it. I'm sort of like, wow, I've been scrolling for like 45 minutes. I need to stop this. And I don't say this to like make anyone feel bad, but it's just it's the evidence. It literally we need to look at it, especially when you're having kids, because if children pick up when we can't be present with them, they pick up on it. They're energetically so tuned into you that if you can't be present with them and enjoy actually just enjoy being with them, that will feel manifest in them as low self-worth.
So let's move into the business world in regards to how does emotional intelligence impact your ability in business?
Yep.
So an example of someone who is feeling an emotion from their emotional home, how does that show up in business?
Yeah. So I find this really interesting, right? Like after coaching thousands of people, you get to see a pattern emerge, and you sit there and listen to people tell their story, and he did this, she did this, and then this happened and that happened, and then I felt this. And I'm like, there have been so many times where I've sat there and thought, wow, why did you feel that because of this? That doesn't make sense to me. But then when you see their life and how that emotion has played out in so many different ways in their life in different scenarios, you start to see, wow, that's your emotional home. So I think that has helped me. But I will say this, like before I was into emotional intelligence, you know, I ran a huge team, and I would say I was a very emotionally unsafe person. I didn't think so at the time. I thought I was one of those people that paid for our girls to go and do self-development days. We would go and like do nights out for dinner. And I thought I was a really good boss. But what the truth was, the girls feared me. If they brought something to me like feedback or something, if they disagreed with me, I could not tolerate it because I had so much shame come up in me and I took it really personally. Yeah. So I think that for leadership, it's really important to do this work so that you don't take things personally, because ultimately your success is going to be, you know, also hiring people around you who know more than you in different areas and can help you to help your business be better. But also too, so that you can understand people's complaints underneath what they're really complaining about. You know, there's a piece of research that I read where something like 72% of people do not leave their jobs because of the reasons that they say they do. It's actually because people need three things in the workplace. They need to feel valued, they need to feel appreciated, and they need to feel significant.
The biggest thing I learned time and time again is people aren't motivated by money.
Yeah, they're not.
And
they're
sometimes just words of affirmation go a lot further than a pay rise.
You know what? I found it so interesting. You know, the first staff member I hired, you know, I thought that she would, I really wanted to give her, that's right. I wanted to give her a pay rise. And when I offered that, she didn't even seem that excited about it. And I was so confused. And I remember getting really angry about it. And then I started understanding love languages, and I had a chat to her, and she said, do you know what would really mean a lot to me? I want a title. I want a title. I was like, you can call yourself whatever you want. You can call yourself the owner for all I care. I do not care. But it was so interesting what was important to her as opposed to what I thought was important. And that's important to you as a leader if you want to get the most out of your team and you want to keep your staff and you want them to really excel for you, because when you understand them at a deeper level, they will move mountains for you.
Yeah. It's also just understanding, like, what do they actually want? Some people want to work from home more.
Yeah.
Some people don't mind being in the gym.
Yeah.
It's just there's so many different things. And it comes down to, do you actually give a shit about your stuff?
100%. And you know what? I run emotional intelligence workshops for businesses and organizations. And, you know, the thing is, so many people are struggling in their home lives. Like, so many people are struggling in their relationships, in their parenting, like in their mental health. And when you have a workshop and you can send people home with these little skills, these little bits of information, that has a positive ripple effect on their family life and their home life. That then has an immediate effect on the business, because they are then happier at home. So they then naturally show up for you. So it's, a lot of people sort of get confused as to whether this stuff is personal or professional. I'm like, it's people. It's
Yeah.
everywhere. Like, we have to do this work.
What's a quote? It's like, business problems don't exist. It's personal problems show up in business.
100%. Every time. Well, how many times have you, with all your staff, had to sit there and been an accidental counselor?
Yeah. We've just been so lucky. Like, I feel so unqualified to talk on this subject.
Yeah.
I've never had to deal with difficult stuff because
Yeah.
we've just been unbelievably fucking lucky.
That's so good.
And just like you, I didn't realize how lucky I was.
Yeah.
In front of all these other gym owners. I'm like,
Yeah.
I did what?
I know.
So
I think the same thing.
I don't consider myself to be a good manager. I'm just lucky.
But you're a good operator, so that's probably why you attract those people as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just picking your battles.
I think that's important too.
Really important.
Yeah.
And just the whole prideful ego employees. I'm the best. I know everything.
Yeah.
Just get out of your own way.
Yeah. And I think, that's another way people search for significance, right? Like, we don't take that so personally when we actually see, this person's, for some reason, it's really important to them that they feel significant. Like, they want to feel validated. They want to feel acknowledged. Yeah. Okay. That's interesting.
I actually hate titles.
Yeah.
I don't like the word employee.
Yeah.
I don't like the word boss.
Yeah.
And I like my team. My
totally.
Teammates,
yeah.
I feel like I would never want to have a boss.
Yeah.
Let's have a boss.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Yeah. And I do think we're seeing this shift culturally where we are seeing more of that team, like sort of team aspect and team culture coming into it, which is awesome. Like, you're seeing companies like Google and, Microsoft and stuff, which are giving people completely different titles, like Apple, like, they're giving people like really fun sort of ways of being acknowledged, which I think is awesome.
What is the biggest thing you see time and time again in small businesses where their emotional intelligence really gets in the way? Is there one that just keeps reoccurring?
Yeah, I see people misunderstanding people. So, and I see people assuming negative intent. I'll never forget, I went through my breakup and I was living with a really good friend of mine. He's a really good friend and a bit of a mentor to me. He doesn't probably even know it. And I remember, like, I was in a lot of pain and my ex and I was still sort of talking, trying to figure it out. But I just kept assuming negative intent because I was so scared. And I remember telling my friend all this stuff that was happening, these conversations. And he said to me, Nez, why do you not assume the positive about him? And I remember that really took me back. I was really confused. Yeah. He said, this guy you lived with for 3 years, you built a business with him. He loves you. He's going through a hard time. Why are you assuming the worst about him every point? And I was like, wow, that's such an interesting point. Yeah. So I see people assume the worst about someone. And that's always coming from a wound. And I also, and what it doesn't allow you to do, this is the one thing I think I was good at with Lasom and why I'm a good coach is I can see the potential in someone. Like, I can see, even in you, right? I can see once you start working on your emotional intelligence, like, I can see you stepping onto even bigger stages, or maybe not even stages, but showing up in a bigger way and having a bigger impact in the world. I mean, what you do, I don't know. It sounds like you don't really need to be around people so much, which is awesome. But you might get to a point where you just want to give back because you want to help people, because I know you have that desire to. But I think I can always see the best version of someone, and I can also see why they're stuck at that level. So I can always help them move through that. And that for me is like everything. Like, I've visualized my funeral. I want to be someone that people look at and say, she changed my life because she believed in me, because that's what I needed, right? We all end up being the person that we needed when we were younger that we didn't get. And I don't see that enough. I don't see people seeing their stuff in the true potential that they can really be and being able to take them.
The whole thing about seeing people in a positive light, people aren't evil.
No, none of us are.
Don't do bad things deliberately.
No.
It is miscommunication.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's a really great quote. I'm not sure where it's from. It's hard to hate up close.
Hard to hate up close. Yeah, that's a good one.
Understand someone and understand what they've been through, their experiences. It is hard to like really hold a grudge or be vengeful, because like, I understand. I don't 100%. Agree with it, but I understand.
100%. And it comes back to that, like, people are always acting in a way that's keeping them the safest possible. Like, for whatever reason, if people push you out or people are acting up or whatever's going on, they're always trying to numb pain or they're trying to keep themselves safe. Like, you see people that drink alcohol, take drugs, do all that sort of stuff. They're numbing pain. Like, they're numbing a lot of emotional pain.
When I was younger, I used to always thought that I wanted to help everyone.
Yep.
And I found myself talking at people.
Yes.
So how do you help people when you can see what they're doing wrong? It's so blatantly obvious, but they're not ready for the help.
Yeah. It's such a great question. And to be honest, I'm not great at this. This has been something I've had to work really hard at. There's a great quote, don't let your strengths negate your weaknesses. So for me, as a coach or a speaker or a mentor, one of my strengths is being able to talk to people and see what's going on and then call them out on it and call them forward. But that's when it's invited, right? That's when someone's asking me to weigh in. This can be very painful for my relationships, like my friendships or my intimate relationships, where someone just wants to be accepted by me and potentially just wants me to listen. You know, I've really damaged a lot of friendships by trying to coach people rather than just actually listening. So that's something I do still have to work at. And you know, I have a lot of compassion because this was me 4 years ago. Like 4 years ago, my ex and I were going to a therapist and I loved him so much. I did not want the relationship to end. And I also could not see my part in it. I could not do the work. We were at a therapist and she was saying I wanted her to make him the problem. Like I was so desperate for the issue to be him. And then I was so delighted when she said it was. She said, he's just burnt out. He's overworking, this and that. And I was so relieved because it wasn't me.
My fault.
Now, isn't it interesting how many people listening to this podcast right now are in a relationship and their partner's not doing the work and they are, and they think it's because they don't love them? Well, this is to tell you that's not the case, because I loved this man so much and yet I still couldn't see what I couldn't see. I remember him saying to me, Nerida.
Does he know the new Nerida? The emotional intelligent Nerida?
He does. I mean, we're not in touch, but to be honest, like, you know, and we have spoken about this, like I have apologized. I've come full circle and it's been beautiful to actually own my part in it, because I remember him saying to me, Nez, I just feel like I'm not good enough for you. And I thought he meant I was too good for him. Very different. 6 months later, after we'd broken up, I was at a barbecue with a friend and I was chatting to this couple that I really love. I've known them for years. And I said to him, what is it about Sophie that made you propose to her? Like, I was really curious because he would always been a bit of a ladies' man. And he said to me, Nez, she's the only woman that I knew was too good for me, but never made me feel like that. And that for me blew my mind. And then all these moments of me criticizing him, judging him, complaining, I was like, oh my God, I could see it. But I couldn't see it until much later. And so I think when people aren't ready to take responsibility and accountability, it's for two reasons. They either feel a lot of fear or they feel a lot of shame. And until that dissipates and they're ready to see it, you can't force anyone. I got into an argument on my DMs the other day, or on one of my posts, because someone
media fighting.
I was very angry because this woman was saying that you know, people are privileged to do this work because we're white and we come from middle class. And I said to her, no amount of money can ever force you to see something you're not ready to see. And no amount of not having the money can stop you doing the work when you're really ready.
So that's an interesting take, right? Because like people are starving, people are no water, going through horrible crimes. And then people have a wound, right? Or whatever that case may be. And that woman's just like, you have no right to feel that way because there's real tragedy going on in the world. Mm-hmm. So she's effectively just saying, suck it up.
Well, what she's saying is, what I think is really underneath that, like, is the only way we can change the world is by changing ourselves. Now, what's really interesting, I was a keynote speaker at Lifeline event last week. They said that there have been 3 days in the last 12 months that their calls have spiked like crazy. One of those days was after the march of the domestic violence, like the big domestic violence marches that just happened recently. You know, all the stuff that happened in Sydney.
That's and I thought, amazing data, by the way, to have those calls logged.
And do you know what's so interesting? I noticed the same spike in couples reaching out to me around the same time. So, and you know, I had this one client, right? I had this one client come to me and she was on the verge of a breakup. I didn't know her partner at all, never met him. And we had a session and I could instantly see she was getting caught up in the news and the media, and then she was projecting that onto him. So I'm telling her all these things and she's kind of going, she suffers from a wound of judgment, right? A lot of shame. So she's projecting that wound straight back onto her partner and judging him because he's not doing enough to help women in domestic violence. Now, what was really interesting, they were on the verge of a breakup. They were done. After this conversation, she was like in tears. She went back to him and she said, oh my God, I can see all this stuff. I can see that I've been judging you. I've been doing this. I've been doing that. They reconnected. He reached out to me and asked me for a session, and he came in and sat with me and he said, Nerida,
sorry.
I don't know. He said, I don't know what you did, but he said, I'm not even kidding you. That night I went to the pub with a mate and I said to him, 3 things need to change in order for this relationship to continue. He said, I love her, but there are these 3 issues. And he said, no, I'm not kidding you. No word of a lie. She came home that night and owned all 3 of those things. He said, I thought you had wired me. I thought you were listening into my conversation. He's like, how did you do it? So it's like, I could see she was going through all this pain because she's emotionally, so this is the thing, this is the emotional home. She has not resolved her judgment and shame from childhood. So now all this media propaganda is coming up and she's latching onto it because it's energetically connecting to her. And instead of her working through it, she's projecting it straight onto her partner. So isn't it ironic that she was going through this huge breakup, causing all this violence in her own home, that she's all about domestic violence for women? What help are you by getting on social media and screaming about it? You know, I spent so many hours for free talking men off ledges throughout that time that were going through a hard time. Like, I go to meditation retreats, I go to women's circles, I do all the healing. I have more of an impact on people by actually leaving my truth and inviting people along rather than screaming about injustice on social media. And I will die on that hill. Like, you've got to think about, what are you actually putting out into the world? Are you creating more violence and more pain? Or actually, are you trying to create peace and harmony in your own home and in your own community?
And all that stuff where it's like what you said, like, these are privileged problems. It doesn't mean they don't matter.
Well, I think that the more, like, this, I find this so funny. When I sold La Somme, like, my accountant sat down and said, "You know what, Nerida, you've raised over $500,000 for different charities over the years that you had La Somme."
A lot of money.
The more successful I became, the more I was able to give back. So I just want to challenge anyone yelling at people on social media, which I've done myself. So don't worry, I hold myself to this, same account. But getting into arguments on social media doesn't do anything. If you actually want to have an impact on the world, getting out into your community and actually doing it has more impact. So that's what I challenge people on. Like, are you really spreading awareness? Or could you just go to your local church or go to your local community event or go to a meditation retreat and learn how to hold space for people's emotions?
Be the change that you want to see, as opposed
100%.
to complaining about social media.
100%.
So being a fitness business owner, how can emotional intelligence help them have a better gym, have more members, ultimately have more profit, and then have more impact in the community? Yeah,
well, I really believe that gym owners these days, like, I think that you're the sort of, like, I talk about the spotlight theory, right? When, if you were to go into your gym this afternoon, most people would probably know who you are. They'd probably know, oh, Jamie, the owner's here, right? Whereas if I walked into the gym, no one would know who I was. So what you don't understand as a gym owner is all of your members are constantly tracking you and noticing you, right? They want to be around you. They want to talk to you. They want to train with you. So when you understand the influence that you have around your team members and your members, and how you can build those relationships, I really believe you create an atmosphere and a culture and environment that is really hard to leave. I've talked to so many girls from La Somme. Like, the one common thing I hear is nothing beats La Somme. Like, there was nothing like it. I created a community and an atmosphere that is just hard to beat. Like, so many members were members of La Somme for years and years and years, and then have bounced around gym after gym after gym because they just can't find their home. So I believe that, like, when you understand that you want to give back to your community, you want to create something, like, whatever that is, it doesn't have to be girly and community based. It could be you really want to focus on performance and creating high elite athletes. It might be families. Like, you might want to create a beautiful community families, like, whatever that looks like for you. I think when you actually really understand that and you have the emotional intelligence to create it, it's a very powerful thing that people don't want to leave. And I think it's important because people, again, want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to be valued. They want to be, recognized. And so when you give people that feeling, you'll have raving fans for life.
So do you think emotional intelligence is like a really hard to acquire soft skill?
No,
or are there things you can do on a daily basis to improve it?
Oh my God, if I can do it, anyone can. I would say I was one of the most emotionally unsafe people ever 4 years ago. And now I hear people say to me all the time, like, you understand me, you accept me, I feel so safe with you. Like, if I can learn it, anybody can. I definitely think it is something you have to work at every day. I think practicing emotional attunement, like when you're with someone and they might be going through something, trying to just mentally check in and say, what do I think this person's feeling right now? I think that they're struggling, they're feeling a bit sad, or they're feeling a bit lonely, or they're feeling a bit frustrated. And then you can reflect that back to them. That connection there where someone feels really understood by you, then just allows people to feel like, oh, okay, there's nothing wrong with me. This is okay. This person gets me. And I really believe that we all need that on a deep core level.
I think most PTs aren't emotionally intelligent, given the fact that they're all very, very, very young for the most part.
Yeah.
And they're so fit, strong, and healthy, they actually forget what it's like for that person to walk into a gym.
Yes.
Who hasn't been there for 10 years.
Oh my God, I definitely think that too. And I definitely think we, PTs, I sometimes, do you know what frustrates me? I train at a gym, right? And I train at a couple of different gyms. And when I walk through the door and no one really acknowledges me, like, that to me really bothers me. I just want a quick hello, right? I think everyone wants that. Now, when I'm in a gym, like I used to train in CrossFit gyms for years. You put me in a CrossFit gym, I can use any of the equipment. But you put me in a Globo gym, I have no idea. I don't know how to use the leg press. I get so frustrated. I train, at this gym, and I walk in and there are 3 or 4 people on the front desk. I walk in, none of them say hello to me. And then I go and I'm sort of like on the equipment and I'm a bit stuck and I feel a bit frustrated. It'd be nice every now and then if there was a staff member walking around just checking in, like, how you going, Nez?
So is that the staff member's fault or the owner's
fault?
100%
it's the owner's fault. Like that. And I've given feedback to the gym saying, hey, every now and then, like asking your staff to just do a roving lap of the gym and just check in on members would be really helpful. Yeah. But this gym is a pretty big gym. I don't think they have that. It's not like a small grassroots sort of gym. Yeah. But I do believe that, like, if you can help people, you should.
Yeah.
So I think that having that emotional awareness to go, there are all these people walking in here that have just joined the gym and don't know how to use equipment. Maybe I'll go do a lap every now and then and just smile at people and see if anyone needs me.
I think the biggest thing with emotional intelligence for me is just everything is my fault. Every single thing is my fault, but in a good way. Like, so it allows me to not judge people. So if someone makes a mistake on my team,
of course,
that's my fault.
Taking responsibility.
Like there is a
100%
breakdown in communication. From get to A to Z. I left one step out.
100%.
And that's where just like I think where people lack emotional intelligence is they think of their stuff like you should know that. I'm like, well, hang on, you haven't told them.
That's right.
And it sounds so stupid, but breaking it down, like turn computer on. Sit at desk. Open up Slack. Go to this channel. Make sure you at the person. Like every single little step needs to be down. And then if they're not following it, well, it's a different thing. But most people will follow it because like no one wants to do a bad job.
You're right. And what you've hit on there is, I think, where like a lot of people, gym owners particularly, probably don't have those step-by-step policies and procedures like down pat. And they just assume people, like, because it's in their head, right? I know I was like this for years. Everything was in my head. So I just did it. And I took for granted that people didn't think the same way I did. So I do think that's part of being a really good operator, having every single system, every single way you do things, like written down step by step. But yeah, I think you're right. You do have to, I was the same. Like one thing I've been really good at is always taking responsibility. Like, well, no, I won't say always. I would say there's two versions of me as a gym owner. There's like narrative 1.0. And then when I got a coach 2.0, and that was when I became a better leader, right? And so in that chapter, when something wouldn't go right, I wouldn't get frustrated. I'd be like, okay, what did I miss here? What did I not explain properly? How did I not take those steps? What do I need to do differently next time?
So that's what I thought like emotional intelligence actually was. Just effectively being able to read the room.
Yeah. Well, it is. It's definitely about taking responsibility and definitely having that awareness, a self-awareness for sure. But I think it goes deeper than that for me. It's like it's your relationship with other people as well. And it's being able to read people at a deeper level.
So going back to emotional intelligence, so imagine if you feel resentment towards someone or envy towards someone. How does that track back to emotional intelligence? Is that uncovering where is that resentment coming from?
Yeah, I love this question.
It's a classic tall poppy. Like, I'm resentful of that person, but like, why am I resentful?
Okay, so you're resentful of that person because they have something that you don't think you can have.
I don't think I can have it.
Yeah. Is that what it is?
I thought I could have it. Oh, I'm saying I'm not resentful.
Okay.
But I'm saying people are, right?
Usually we're resentful towards people when they're doing something, like a lot of women, right? A lot of mothers are resentful of their partners because their partners are going out, going to the gym, looking after themselves, and they wish that they could do more of that, but they won't. You know, I see a lot of people, like say, for instance, me, I can sometimes notice this come up in me. I can potentially look at couples with kids and feel resentment or feel envy because they have something that I don't believe I can have. Now, when I shift myself into a state of, no, I get to have that. It's coming. I'm just in a season of waiting. This is beautiful. I love that they just got engaged. I love that they've had a baby. I'm happy for them. Then what I do is I energetically bring that goal closer to me.
So you feel as though if you feel as though that you can attain it, there's no resentment. If you feel as though that you can't attain it, there's lots of resentment.
Don't you find it interesting? Well, think about this, right? Do you look up to Alex Hormozi?
100%.
Exactly. So deep down, you have a belief that you can be like him. Whereas if you flip that and you put that onto, you look at someone where you've got envy towards for some other reason, it's because of the flip.
So I'd be like, Alex Hormozi's a scammer. We could never.
Yeah, exactly. People that judge him, deep down, it's not the judgment, it's the belief that they're projecting onto that person that they can't ever be someone like him. So they're resenting the very thing that he has that they want, that they don't think that they can have.
It's really common in Australia, by the way.
Yeah, definitely. I know, and I see this in America. America are really good at just like owning their success. People sell themselves, people talk. And I think I do this naturally too, right? I have a very high self-esteem and healthy amount of confidence because I do believe in myself. And I'm not afraid to speak that. And I get a lot of women saying, you're intimidating. Well, there's a very big difference between me being intimidating to you or you feeling intimidated.
So one thing you always talk about is imposter syndrome. And we may just blatantly disagree here.
Yep.
It annoys me so much when people get imposter syndrome because like you just don't know what you're fucking talking about. That's what I think imposter syndrome is. Like I've noticed it before where like, for example, if I make content on how to run a Facebook ad for a gym owner, I could talk for hours, no notes required. And I wouldn't give a fuck if anyone disagreed because I know that I'm right. However, if I spoke about I'm going to choose this perfect site to sign a lease and go through council negotiations, I would feel like an imposter talking about those things. So like, the idea of like the imposter syndrome is just a really interesting one. I see people say it all the time with emotional, like, well, what is it? Like, why are you feeling that way?
Yeah, that's a really good, it's actually a really good analogy. And I do agree with you. So essentially what you're saying is when when I step into a space where I feel really confident, my integrity, my confidence is there. But when I step into a space that I don't know that much about, yes, there's that self-doubt, that potentially fear of inadequacy, like that imposter syndrome comes up. Imposter syndrome is essentially just a term for you feel unworthy or you feel unauthorized to speak on that subject or to be in that role, right?
And then going back to speaking to yourself kindly, I guess the kind person says, well, you should go learn more about that. And the mean person says, you're a fucking idiot.
Well, I think what happens, I think the thing with imposter syndrome, right, is I think what a lot of people do is they do a comparisonitis. Like they look at people do this to me, right? They look at me and they're like, but it's okay for you to feel like that because you've got all this experience. Really, I just think about it and I'm like, okay, I look at Alex Hormozi, right? Is there ever a chance he's going to coach you directly? Probably not. Not until maybe you're making, maybe 10 mil,
100 million
a year. But is there someone in between Alex Hormozi and you that potentially might coach you that's sort of halfway?
Yeah, there's always people
exactly. So all you need to do is to be a couple of steps ahead of someone to be able to have that experience and to go, yep, I've done that before. I can teach you how. So I really believe that, people say, oh my God, there are so many coaches in the world now. And I'm like, great. It means more people are doing work on themselves. More people are learning about themselves and wanting to be better. That's awesome. I'm not threatened by that at all. Yeah. So I think what imposter syndrome is people are too focused. Like if I focused on Brene Brown, wanting to be like her rather than just the next step for me, then maybe I would get imposter syndrome. But I'm just like, I don't need to be on TED Talks. I just need to have a couple of clients every month rolling in. I just need to be somewhere along that level. So I think you just need to focus on what skills do I have and what experience do I have and what do I have to offer rather than the big gap around what you don't.
Yeah. I just think with the internet marketing space, it's really interesting because you're in the coaching space. I guess I'm in the coaching space too.
Oh yeah,
even
of course.
though I'm more I do it for you.
Yeah.
I just we spoke about this before the podcast. I get so annoyed because I agree there should be lots of coaches, lots of people helping. There's also a lot of bullshit too.
Of course, but that's like anything.
But how can you feel like an imposter if you are truly confident in what you're talking about and you believe in what you say?
Well, I think that this comes down to childhood.
So you feel as though someone can be still confident, someone can still be knowledgeable, someone can still have got results, have all the evidence behind them, and still feel like an imposter.
Okay, 100%. So one of my best friends, right? She is a gun at social media. When we talk, we go for walks and I listen to her talk about social media and the analytics behind it and the trends and the reels and I'm blown away by what she knows. I'm literally sitting there going, oh my God, I wish I was recording this. Now, when I actually ask her to step forward and come and present with me, all of a sudden she goes into a total imposter syndrome. Now, when I look at her childhood, it makes so much sense. She's running from fear of being shamed, of not being good enough, because that's what she experienced in her childhood, right? There was all this messaging around, follow the steps, go to school, go to uni, get a job, stay safe. So I actually tried to sell the gym to her, right? I said, hey, I think you should buy this gym off me. You're the perfect person. People already were saying, does Ash own the gym? She would never take a risk because she was so afraid. Now she went out and worked in a job that she hated. And then she realized, far out, I've got some skills here. I should go out and work for myself. But she's the perfect example of she has the skills and the knowledge, but she also lacks that self-belief because she's so fearful of being criticized.
So how do you gain that self-belief?
You have to do the internal work, the limiting beliefs. So you have every day we're going into one of two places, love or fear. Now, I've really noticed this has been so interesting to witness in myself because I have two parts of my life, one that I thrive in, one that I suck in. My business is where I thrive. So I have a relentless ability to believe, no matter what. Like if I put myself out there and ask to go on a few podcasts and I get no's, it does not affect me. I'm a bit disappointed, but I'm like, okay, I'll just try again in 6 months. I don't go into a story about it. Yet I could go on a date. I went on a date with a guy that I wasn't even interested in, a month ago. Like I wasn't even interested in him. I honestly, it was the most dull date I've ever been on.
And he rejected you.
He didn't follow up. And all of a sudden I'm going into a story going, oh, well, why didn't he want to ask me? What does that mean about me? Does that mean I'm unlovable? What's wrong with me? So my noticing the difference in my thought patterns in relationships as opposed to business has been very interesting. Yeah. So in relationships, I don't have I'm working on it, but having that same ability to just like not make things mean something bad about me. I think that's the difference.
That's really different, right? Because like the brain's a meaning-making machine.
Yeah.
And I just don't care. Like,
yeah, well, that's why.
It's like, can you persist? Can you still do the thing regardless of how you feel?
That's what I mean, though. That's why you are successful, because you've got the ability to not make something mean something bad about you. But if you had that shame spiral, that's what's very crippling. And that's what the reality is for a lot of people. A lot of people go into a shame spiral, either in their relationships or in their business, because something isn't going the way that they.
I think it goes back to, is there actually truth in it?
Oh, there's often not. It's often not, but it's about what's believed.
What I'm saying is, but if there is truth, they're the statements that hurt.
Well, the only reason anything ever triggers us is because we fear on some level it might be true.
Yeah, or it is true.
Well, yeah, and maybe it is, but I would always argue truth. Give me an example.
So someone says that I know nothing about HR, staffing, employee, W-2, paying super.
Yep.
And I would agree.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But if I did a talk on like, hey, this is how you hire staff, this is my job description, this is the 3-stage interview process I asked you, these are the questions I asked for, this is the onboarding form, I'll be talking shit.
But are these things that you actually do have some knowledge in?
Like
basic.
Oh, yeah. But so then if someone says, Jamie, you shouldn't be talking about that because you don't really fucking know what you're talking about.
Okay, I'm just going to pull at this thread a little bit. I'm going to pull at this thread though. But do you think that there's one person that might benefit from that talk?
Yeah, but I'm not the best person to give that talk.
Okay. You might not be the best, but the best might be Alex Hormozi, and that person can't hire Alex Hormozi.
Of course, I get that.
This is what I mean, right?
So that would be a form of imposter syndrome. You don't think you're qualified enough to talk on a subject.
Well, I think it's all about the room that you're in, right? Like, I think what's important is to understand I really look at this, right? We're all climbing a ladder, and we're all climbing this ladder up, and some people are in front of us, some are behind us. And if sometimes the people in front of us give us a pull, like a leg up every now and then if sometimes we pull the people up from underneath us and it's equal, we all get to make it, right? But if you're constantly pulling from above or constantly pulling up, then we don't. So the way I look at it is we're all on a ladder. So you might be 2 rungs ahead of me in business, right? And so, even though you might sit there and say you're not the best person to speak about X, Y, Z, I know that every single time I've had a conversation with you, I've walked away with huge value. So it's about, if someone walks away with value on something, then it's been helpful. Does that make sense?
That makes
I
sense.
think what you're doing is you're having a very black and white, like it's either yes or, whereas, and that's a low sign of emotional intelligence because there's so much gray. There's always gray. There have been people that have coached with me who've had massive transformations. And then there have been people who haven't. But that doesn't mean I'm good at what I do or I'm not good at what I do. At the end of the day, some of that rests on that person.
Yeah.
It's about their willingness to do the work as well. So I think that when you talk about this, I think there can be a bit of gray. And I think that as long as you're helping, every time I sign up for an event or I think about going to something, I used to have so much scarcity around it. Like, can I afford this? My friend would say to me, if you learn one thing at that event, it's worth it. And I was like, that's so true. So I think that we just need to relax our judgment and yes, there might be a HR expert who is really qualified to talk on that. And she might be busy every day of the week and she can't come and talk to me about HR, or she might charge me 10 grand to talk to me about it. Whereas I might come to you and you might charge me $500. The
biggest thing I've noticed in particular, and I have the smallest amount of imposter syndrome ever, but if ever I try and, for example, I make a lot of content, right? I'm one take Jamie. If I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The second I stray off, 10 takes.
Yeah.
So then I question, well, like, should I actually be making content about that? That's not feel like an imposter. It's just like, is this video that I'm going to make actually providing value when it's not, when I'm not 100% confident?
Can you give me an example of what that is, what the topic is?
So it would be more around comparing my knowledge around lead generation to retention.
Yeah.
So Mitch would more do the content on retention operations.
Yeah.
I'm more marketing and sales.
Yeah.
So I'd leave that to him.
Yeah. But do you enjoy talking about that?
Not really.
Okay. Well, there's your thing, right? I think what we need to do is we need to look at what do I really feel lit up by and I love talking about. That's usually where you're in your genius zone. Like for me, you know, this has been one of my biggest struggles. People always say to me, you're emotional intelligence coach, but what does that even mean? So, you know, and you and I have had conversations about this. You said to me years ago, Nerida, you should just talk about business. You've got demonstrated experience in business. You know what you're talking about. And that really sat with me because, yes, I love working with.
It's facts, though.
Yeah, 100%.
That's my whole thing.
100%. But do you know what's so interesting? I guarantee you the majority of people who will resonate with this will not resonate with what I've said about business. It'll be about what I've said about childhood. So what I notice is all of the content I put out, like, yes, sometimes the business resonates, but people love understanding the childhood, emotional home, you know, all the relationship stuff. But yet I don't have demonstrated experience in that. I'm currently not in a relationship. I'm not married and I'm not a parent. Now, one of my really good friends years ago reached out to me for some help, and I worked with him for like 6 months, and he's a real jokester. And he said to me at the end of it, he was literally like, Nerida, you've saved my life. Like I was really in the worst space ever. He said, if you'd told me 10 years ago that I'd be talking to Nerida Bint about relationships, I would have laughed. He's married, been married for 14 years, got 3 kids. Now, I could have taken that really personally and really been offended by that. And sometimes I do question myself. But then I go back and I open up my phone and I've got dozens and dozens and dozens of messages from people saying, you have literally saved my relationship. You've saved my life. Oh my God. Thank you so much.
What I said before about like, you've got the evidence.
Yeah,
so
true.
Why would you feel like an imposter? My whole thing is like, if you feel like an imposter,
maybe you are.
But that like one of my good friends, James, was a great line. He said, do you think people that working at Lifeline on the phones, saving lives, do you think they feel like an imposter? Or are they just helping people?
Yeah, they're just doing their best.
They're just doing their best.
Yeah.
Right? And I feel as though like, if you feel like an imposter, then you probably are an imposter. That's just my belief. Like Brooke, one of our mutual friends, working with you, great friend of mine.
Yeah.
Like she can talk about sales all fucking day long.
Yeah.
And then get her talking about something else, for example, marketing, she wouldn't feel confident.
But do you know what? She still feels like an imposter even when she's talking about sales.
That's interesting.
She's going on a podcast next week, a massive podcast. She's already freaking about it, but she's talking about her sales business. So then I present that to you. And I'm like, well, there we've got someone who we both know and acknowledge has an amazing skill set, knows what she's talking about, but I guarantee you that imposter syndrome will still pop up for her. And does that mean she's not good at what she does?
And she's great.
Does that mean she shouldn't talk about it?
So where is that rooted from?
Childhood.
So back to the emotional.
100%. Every time.
Yeah.
It's not actually about the knowledge. It's about her sense of self.
What about, is it talking publicly about the knowledge?
Well, it's about the fear of being criticized or the fear of being judged. And so that comes back to childhood, because I would argue every day of the week, if we're raised in homes where we have loving, attentive parents who are really attuned to us and we are very secure, we will go out into the world expecting that people want to hear from us and that we won't expect to be criticized. We won't expect to be judged. We'll expect the opposite. And then when it does happen, if you are judged or you are criticized, it's actually weird. You're kind of like, oh, that's weird. You won't take it personally because it would feel odd to you to be treated that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So
very important to see that.
Emotional home, it's effectively limiting beliefs.
Yeah, it's an emotional addiction.
It's a perspective you see life through based on what happened in the
yes, 100%.
It's limiting beliefs around how much money they can earn based on their parents said, hey, like you just got to pay the rent.
Well, it's limiting in belief, but it's also the emotions that our body has learnt to play out. So I'll tell you this. I grew up very feeling very often sadness, loneliness, disconnection, right? I don't remember my childhood being filled with joy, laughter, play. I don't remember a lot of that, right? It was quite depressive. Now, you know, I grew up and I still kept playing out those emotions, right? And I really noticed this. I noticed every now and then I would go and I would like have a good time with some friends. Like I'd be, you know, let myself enjoy, you know, myself. But then I'd get to a point where I would feel uncomfortable and I would do something to sabotage the environment to move it back to a more serious or sadder place. So I noticed, I was like, wow, I've got this weird inability to feel joy for a long period of time because my body has literally doesn't know what that feels like. I want to be in a relationship, but do you know how often I used to focus on how alone I am? I'm alone, I'm alone, I'm alone, I'm all alone, I'm so sad. Da, da, da. Oh, it's just an emotional addiction that you keep focusing on until you learn, oh my God, I'm creating the very thing I don't want. I need to change. So I need to change. I actually need to change before the thing.
Yeah.
How many times we live in a society where people think, I'll be happy when I get pregnant. I'll be happy when I get married. I'll be happy when I buy the house. I'll be happy when I've got the 10 million in the bank. I'll be happy when I've got the body. But how many times have people gotten to those points and it's like it gets moved?
Yeah.
That's the thing I'm talking about.
The biggest thing I see with like people, and I'm no emotional intelligence coach, obviously, is the labels.
Yeah.
Labels,
oh yeah.
labels
God
do
yeah.
my head in.
Yeah.
And I'm really attuned to them.
Mm.
I'm always this type of person. I've always done this.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
also going to learn tech. I've always been a smoker.
Yeah.
And I'm just like,
Change your language.
You are saying, like, you are confirming you are the person that you don't want to be. Like, what are you doing? Like, stop saying it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you keep creating the environment that's keeping you trapped, like, because your words are spells, right? You're constantly creating what is it? Words create worlds. Like, yeah, you do. And I even notice myself, like, sometimes when I'm talking about my emotional home, like, I have to be really mindful to say this used to be my emotional home, because now it's genuinely not. Genuinely, I am a very peaceful, happy, content, kind, calm, compassionate person.
And that's where we're just so different, because I just think stuff happens and we got to get on with it.
Yeah. But like I say again, you're masculine, you're very logistical, and men always are more outwardly focused, like more outcome focused, and women are more details focused.
I guess that's what you'd struggle with. Work with a couple, the wife is all about it, and he's just like, this logistically doesn't make any sense.
The biggest thing I hear is women say that they go to their partner with a problem and he just wants to fix it. And so in that moment, and it makes sense, right? What we have to do is we have to honor both.
Yeah, Ellen's like, I'm having a tough time with a friend. I'm like, let me write the text message.
You just got to do this. Whereas actually she just wants to be witnessed. She just wants you to emotionally tune to her and be like, wow, that must be really difficult. That must be really hard for you to manage. Like, you must be really scared right now. You must be feeling really confused. So that's actually what we're craving, that emotional attunement.
I think if you write it in bullet points, the message will be clearer.
Or you could say, do you want me to help you solve this, or do you want me to listen? That's the one thing I give a lot of men that tip. Just ask and say, what do you need right now? Because this is the thing we have to honor. Like, men are fixers, men are doers, which we need. I was sitting at a cafe just the other day and I saw this car driving up the hill. There was a whole bunch of gym. There's a gym in town. They all come to this cafe after their sessions on a Friday and have coffee. There's like 30 people. There would have been maybe 20 blokes, 10 chicks. This car is rolling up the hill and I can see this guy breaking down. Now, all the women are completely oblivious, but as soon as I see that car break down, the men are just up and out and they're pushing the car, they're helping the guy, they're changing his tire, the whole thing. And I'm like, wow, I really love that the masculine is they're the first to step forward and solve a problem. Like, we have to honor that, right? But when it comes to emotions with your partner, that's actually the moment where you maybe just need to ask, like, hey, honey, I can see you going through something right now. Do you want me to help you fix this, or do you want me to listen? And then she can actually say, I need you to actually help me. I need to figure this out. Or she can go, you know what? I actually just need you to listen.
And that just comes down to like lack of patience. I just want to end the pain as soon as possible.
Yeah. Why is that, do you think? I tell you what, you're in for a rude shock when you have a baby. Because do you know what that is? Your inability to witness her in her emotions is actually a representation of your inability to accept those emotions in you.
So she's feeling what emotion that I'm afraid to?
So women, I used to be the woman. I used to be the kind of woman, if I was sitting in a group of friends and we were all having lunch and someone was like sharing about her divorce and she was getting emotional, I'd be like, oh my God, don't cry. It's okay. Like, let's just talk about something else, because I actually had a terrible relationship to my own sadness. So your inability to tolerate her emotions is actually your inability to tolerate those emotions in you.
Tolerate's a strong word.
You must judge yourself. Like, what are the emotions that when do you find yourself getting most frustrated with her? What emotions are they, do you think?
It's not really frustrated. It's just like, it's the same thing. Like, hey, like, I'm struggling with this issue.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, well, let's do this.
Yep. So when you think about all the issues she's had, what emotion do you think she's often feeling in those circumstances? Is there a common theme?
Yeah, I'm sounding like a real idiot here. No emotional
intelligence.
That's okay.
No, that's okay. Like, is it anger, sadness, fear?
Probably fear.
Yeah, fear. Most women have a fear in their emotional home. So she's feeling a bit of fear. So
Well, it's fear, like, for example, the friendship might not work
yeah,
out.
of course, which makes so much sense. That makes sense, right? We're not judging. So maybe there's a judgment. Like, have you ever felt fear?
Everyone's felt fear.
Yeah. How do you talk to yourself when you feel fear?
The same way. Like, okay, I'm experiencing this problem.
Yeah.
This is the answer.
Yeah.
You're not going to, my whole thing is like, you're not going to feel better if you kick the can down the road.
Yeah.
You may as well face your shit head on.
Okay, so there's 4 things that we do when we emotionally invalidate ourselves and others. We project, we deflect, we dismiss, or we minimize. So again, remember one of our core needs is to feel seen and heard and accepted, right? So if I'm sitting here telling you about like a really painful thing that's happening for me, and you're telling me there's no point focusing on it, don't kick the can down the road, get over it and let's just fix it. That's going to make me feel judged, and it's going to make me feel like, oh, I shouldn't feel this way. There's something wrong with me.
I'm invalidating her emotion.
100%. You're dismissing. And I've got a quiz on my website that you can do to find out what yours is, but that sounds a bit like you probably go between dismissive and minimizing. And, you know, this will really keep you from feeling emotionally connected to people, because deep down they're going to feel judged by you, and especially your kids, because your kids are going to have big emotions. This is where you're going to be tested.
Hard to talk to.
This is going to be really testing for you when you have kids, because they're going to have big emotions. So your ability to sit with
joke, like, Jamie's just absolutely no fucking bullshit.
Yeah, which is great.
Like,
that's a great trait to have. But again, don't let your strengths negate your weaknesses. Like, is your relationships an important thing?
Yeah, of course.
Exactly. So having good relationships means being able to allow people to have their emotions without judging them. And we don't realize that we're judging people by helping them.
That's the thing. I'm trying to help.
And I'm the same. I used to give advice to people, but what I was actually doing was I was invalidating them over and over and over, because they actually just want to know that it's okay for them to feel that way. And again, it's that self-actualization. No one actually wants no one even wants me to rescue them from their pain. People actually want to do the work themselves. They want to bake the sourdough themselves. They want to build the garden bed themselves. They want to bake the cake. They want to move through their emotional problems on their own, but they just want us to be okay with them as they move through it.
It's a perfect way to end the podcast.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Good.
Sense. So, guys, thanks, Nerida, for your time. This podcast has run super, super long. Nerida, how can people find you and the work that you do with emotional intelligence?
Well, I have a really great basic online course, 6-week online course that you can do. You can find it on my Instagram. It's called Emotional Intelligence 101. I recommend you go straight there and listen to that, because I think it's just one of the best emotional intelligent courses you can do. And then also you can work with me one-on-one. I do a 6-month container where we dive deep. I help people with their relationships, their leadership, their parenting, their mental health and well-being. And it's just, I love this work. So please just send me a DM on Instagram.
100%, guys. Thanks for listening. Have a lovely, lovely day.